What's up? It's me, Tommy Mac. Today we are building my classic step stool. It's less than 2 foot squared, it's 9 pieces of wood, and the entire thing is held together with dovetail joinery. The reason I've been building this thing and teaching this for over 20 years is because it's the perfect project for woodworkers of all skill levels. If you're a beginner, it covers milling and hand tool techniques that will carry over into other woodworking projects. And if you're a little more advanced, look at it. There's no hiding anything you touch. And since there's a left and a right, and all the joinery is the exact same, you can really test your precision. What I hope to do today is to show you the most common mistakes we make building something like this, and more importantly, how to avoid them. And it all starts with a piece of wood. To make this project, you need a board that's 9 inches wide, about 9 to 10 feet long. And I've already pre-cut a board into parts. Man, I just love tiger maple, and that's what I'm going to build the stool out of today. But you can build yours out of whatever you want. For me, this is really the most important part of any woodworking project because I'm visually putting together what this stool looks like. You know what I mean? Like, do I want the sides to look great? Do I want the steps to look like they belong together with the front stretcher? You know what I'm saying to you? The chatoins of all this stuff, and all that information is in my head, and it all starts right here on this board. So the first thing I'm going to do is take an inch right off the end because there's a lot of crud on the end of the board. You know what I mean? So you just want to cut that right off and make sure there's no checking. Then for my first step, I'm going to measure down 22 inches because that's the size of the step. And since it's 9 inches wide, I can get the 7 1/4 inches for the step and the 2 inches for the stretcher out of that section. And these parts are going to go together just like this. Next, I'm going to make sure that I have the arrows pointing in one direction, which is this way. Not that this is the ultimate grain direction of this project, but just so I don't lose track of what's what at this stage, okay? So then I can measure over another 22 inches and make my second 2 marks. And then again, since it's wide, I can get the stretcher out of that area. Next, I need to make my first long side piece. And then instead of cutting a small 12-inch piece twice, since I want to get this third stretcher out of this single board, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over 24 inches, make that cut the stretcher out of that piece, and then cut that in half. Finally, I'm just going to cut the last side piece. That's how you break this bad boy apart. And check this out, if you lay it out this way, you're going to have like little to no waste. So now it's all cut apart. I just need to grab these pieces and head to the joiner. To make this project, you really need an 8-inch joiner. The jointer is one of the greatest machines ever invented for woodworking. It turns rough, uneven boards into nice, flat surfaces. And they all work the same. They all have an adjustable in-feed table with a cut head and an out-feed table. The out-feed table has to be set even with the cut head when it's at top center, and they all have an adjustable sliding fence with a guard. Let me just show you how they work, because it really is awesome. You can see that this piece of pine is really uneven. As soon as I go over the cutter head and pick up on the out-feed table, it's going to straighten out this really uneven edge. All right, we'll check it out. Nice, smooth surface. Just a matter of making a few passes until it's flat. And that's how it works. So we can finally start to flatten our parts. We're going to start with one of the steps. It's really important to make sure that this piece of wood is clean from any kind of debris. Check for staples, because honestly, if you have a rock in this and you hit your cutter head, you're going to cause some damage. Trust me, I've changed my share of blades. Now, check this out. You see that? See how it's not even? And this is like really the reason why we have a joiner. What I'm going to do is just try to keep it on the top of that surface, like that right there in the middle, then go over the joiner. Because if I just went to one side, you can see how much material I would need to take off before it started to get flat. And if I did that, chances are this piece would be too thin by the time I got to my project. Another thing is that you need to make sure you don't put your hands anywhere near that cutter. So grab your safety gear and make sure you're nice and safe. Check it out. You can see what's going on here, right? There are high spots here and here, but I'm starting to flatten it out here. So the next thing I need to be aware of is the grain direction. And it's still pretty difficult to figure out which way it's going. But what you do is you want to feel it, right? You just want to feel the fibers of the grain. And if they're patted down, that's the direction of the grain. So since this cutter head is on the bottom and is spinning towards me, I know the grain direction needs to go this way. Shut off my dust collector. Check it out. Nice and clean. I know it's 90 degrees, so I'm just going to make a mark like this here. Now I just need to do the rest of my parts. Another great machine here in the shop is the thickness planer. Its primary purpose is to make two faces parallel and get boards down to the proper thickness. It has a huge table on it. It has rollers on the bottom. It has an adjustable wheel here that picks this thing up and down, and it has a massive cutter head that spins towards you. It's really simple to use. You just need to make sure the grain direction is facing that way. Get your gear on, set the depth, and stuff it in the machine. When you're doing your rough milling, make sure you skim all your boards and leave them about 3/16 of an inch thicker than you need. The reason why we rough mill parts like this is because that board was under a lot of tension. So we cut these parts a little bit bigger and a little bit thicker because we want all that tension to relax. And since there's a lot of moisture in this wood, we put these sticks in between because we want to give that water a chance to evaporate evenly. So we just stick it up like this and set it off overnight. Then the next day, you just pick up the parts and repeat the process, all right? You want to flatten one side, flatten one side of the joiner, then you want to joint that edge, send it through the planer, making sure you're aware of all that grain direction down to 3/4 of an inch, and now we can finally take these pieces of wood and turn them into parts right here at the table saw. So quickly, a table saw has a table. It has a blade that spins towards you. This thing in the back is called a riving knife. It basically keeps wood from collapsing in on the blade and flying back in your face. This red thing is called an insert that needs to be flush with the table. These two slots are called miter gauge slots. This gizmo is a miter gauge, and this big dog right here is called a rip fence. When it comes to ripping our parts, there are a few things we need to keep in mind. One is that you got to make sure that the fence is parallel to the blade and it's square to the table. Another thing you want to make sure is that your blade is square as well, just like that. Next, we need to think about our fingers, because honestly, the purpose behind here is not to just make great furniture, but to keep all our fingers attached to our body. So the rule of thumb is anything that is outside the width of your hand, feel free to use your hand. Anything that's inside that area, you gotta use a push block, all right? Now trust me when I tell you, the one that shows up with this machine or any other table saw is a piece of junk. So just make your own or use what I use, which is this micro J gripper. So before we can cut all of our pieces to width, we need to set the height of our blade. You don't want the blade too high because it's dangerous and it'll heat up. You want to be halfway through the gullet, which is this right here. There we go. That looks good. Now I need to measure over from my fence to the blade. And I'm going to start with the short sides, and I know this 6 3/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to measure over 6 3/4 of an inch to the inside of that tooth, lock it down. Now the last thing you need to be aware of, the last two things, is the rate of speed in which you go past the blade and where you stop after you make your cut. You don't want to go ripping through the blade because you're going to tear the crap out of it, and you don't want to go too slow because you're going to burn the piece of wood. So once you get through the blade, a good habit to get into is getting past the insert, because trust me, you don't want a piece of wood to get stuck between, the fence and the blade, because it's definitely going to come flying back at you. All right, grab some safety gear, make sure you have good dust collection, and I can make my cuts. Now it's time to cut all these ends off. I needed to make sure that I put all those marks back on the faces of our pieces. When it comes to cutting the ends of boards, you have a lot of options, all right? I'm going to be going with
This Woodpecker's Exact 90.
Typically on a table saw, everybody cuts with the face side up, right? Because the table saw blade is coming through the top and all the tear out is on the bottom. But since we're building this step stool, it's really important to make sure that the dovetails that look like this, the inside of these boards wants to be super clean on the joinery. So the inside of all these pieces are going to be facing up. So I need to remember to mark the inside of my pieces with an X. Check that real quick. Perfect. Now that I have that cut, I'm going to make a mark on it and just cut one end of all our parts. The last thing I need to do is cut all my pieces to final length. I'm just going to spin them over, mark them to the length needed, 20.5, bring it down to the inside of my saw blade, bring my stop block over, lock it into place. There you go. I'm going to cut my steps and the stretchers first, then my tall pieces and short pieces. So now it's time to talk about dovetails. The first thing we need to do is set our marking gauge to the thickness. Oh, hang on a sec. Can't see anything anymore. So set your marking gauge to exactly the thickness of your board until the cutter head is right even with the outside of the material. That looks really pretty good. Now, if you make it too short, what's going to happen is your pin's going to be shallow and you'll have to do a ton of planing on the surface. So if anything, just make this a little bit bigger. But ultimately, you want it to be exact, like this right here. Once it's set, make sure it's not going to move. Now what we need to do is score a line across the top of our side pieces and then basically all of our steps and our stretches. Just go once. You don't need to go a bunch of times. If you go more than once, you're just going to end up with a really thick line. The last thing we need to do before we can lay out our pins is cut our back angle. The reason why this stool has a back angle is so when you stand on the top step, you don't bust your butt. You know what I'm saying here? So I'm just going to measure over an inch right at my marking gauge line. I'm going to make a mark and then I'm just going to hold my straight edge on that mark in the corner of the bottom of the side piece and draw a line. And now we can head to the bandsaw and start cutting. Do yourself a favor, make sure you save this little cutoff, all right? You're definitely going to need it later on. So, the pin board. I'm just going to use one of my short sides and the bottom step, all right? So, the first thing I'm going to do is stick it inside the vise with the outside facing me. Sorry, the outside facing me. The reason why I do that is because when I start to cut this stuff, I want the outside to be nice and clean. Secondly, I need to determine how big I want my pins to be. Now you can make them any size you want, but for me, I like to just come over 1/4 of an inch in from the ends, just like that. Then I'm going to take my bevel, which is set at 1/6, because typically dovetails would be either 1/6 or 1/8. I actually really like 1/6. So what I want to do is keep the body of the bevel against the outside and strike a line with a wicked sharp pencil, all right? I'm going to flip it over and do the same on the other side. Next, I need to determine how many pins I want inside the field here. And for me, I think 2 pins is more than enough. So I'm going to pick up my dividers right here, and I just need to find even spacing. So I'm going to put this side of it down in the middle of that pin that I just drew. Let's see how close I get. I've done this a zillion times, so check it out. I'm actually pretty proud of myself. I did really, really well. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to find the center of the next pins. So I go once, twice, and when I spin it over to here, I'm checking to make sure that this other arm is hitting the middle of that pin, which it is. So I just need to spin it back, hold it in place, grab that pencil, and just put a little dot as close as I can to these points, like that. Once that's done, I'm going to grab my square and I'm going to strike a line just to the outside. And it's just little, like this here. Now that I have these centers laid out as close as I think they should be, next I need to figure out how big I want these pins to be. Now a lot of guys like to make them small. For this tool, for some reason, I just like them a little bit bigger, just under 3/8 of an inch on the short side of the pin. So let me take this off. So I'm going to grab my ruler and I'm going to hold 3/16 of an inch on either side of that center line. Okay, it's 3/8, but I can control how thick this is when I start to cut it with a saw. But it's a good spot to start from, you know. All right, now I'm just going to take the same bevel and draw all these lines. Flip it over. Well, now you can definitely see that I have these two in the middle. They're a little bigger than the ones on the ends. And to be honest with you, that doesn't bother me because I know I can always pare that and make it small. It's always better to make them a little bit bigger because trust me, you can't get that wood back on there if you cut it off. So now I have these lines where I want them. I'm going to take my square and pencil and go down square from the top right to my scribe line. It's really pretty simple, you know what I mean? I think the trick is not to overthink most of this stuff, and you need a sharp pencil. Last line. Perfect. Now I need to start cutting my pins. And I like to use a gent saw. A gent saw has a stiff back to it with a straight handle. And I just feel as though I have more control with this saw. And this is what I learned with, and this is just what I've stuck with. So the first thing that you want to do is put your thumb right next to the line and put the saw against your thumb. And without cutting your thumb, obviously, just go straight back like this, nice and easy. Piece of cake. Anybody can do that. The hard part is going forward because when you put too much pressure on the blade, it digs in and it just won't cut through. So what you want to do is just take super, super light pressure. Okay? I mean, I can do this and not even cut into the piece of wood because I'm barely letting these teeth interact with that piece of wood. The thing that's really important here is that you want to make sure that your blade is going parallel to your square line. And you can eyeball it, all right? You can definitely see it. If you start to move your blade around, you'll be able to see it. So I'm just going to start to go right down my line without dropping into the angle. Now, when it comes to the angle, it gets a little tricky. And that's why I love to use this saw. Now that I have my straight up and down cut, I'm just going to start to drop this saw blade into the wood, trying to track it with that line. And trust me, you see how slow I'm going? I could practically do this with my eyes closed, but when I start to do this, you can see the result, right? I'm already off the line, it's not staying straight, and I'm tearing the crap out of it. So just take your time. Try to use the full length of the saw blade, keep it on an angle like this, and then you get to peek over the side, and just nice and easy until the teeth hit your line. And that's basically it, all right? So I have a few more of these to do, so let me finish them off and we can get cracking on that chisel work. You know, they don't look too bad. I didn't go past my lines yet, the scribe line. So good, I'm feeling pretty good about it. The next thing I need to do is establish my shoulder line so I can remove the rest of this material. When you're working with this stuff, make sure it's securely held down on your bench. One more whack. Here we go. I just got these chisels from my friends over at Blue Spruce. They told me that these are ready to use right out of the box. I mean, look at this, how shiny this thing is. It does have a scratch on it. I've heard that a million times, and I'm going to put these things through the paces, and we're going to see how they work. So what you don't want to do is pick up a small chisel like this and go to your line and smack it down into place. It's obvious what's going to happen. You can see that my scratch line is nice and straight, and then you see how far the chisel moved past that line? It may not look like much, but trust me, that is more than enough to make crappy dovetails. What you want to do is you want to pick up like at least a 3/4 inch chisel, and you want to just drag it into the line. And this is what's great about the marking gauge line. This chisel is just going to drop right in. Listen. You hear that? Now you want to hold it nice and straight and push down with your body weight. Man, I really can't believe how much that chisel made that huge gap. I'm just going to turn it around and I'm just going to try to take that little tiny piece out. Ooh, this is sharp. Okay, now that I have that line established, again, I'm going to take my chisel, put it right into that section, hold it upright, grab my mallet, and just give it a nice little love tap. Do the same thing one more time, nice and easy. Now, if you get carried away, this is what's going to happen. If you hit it like so, and you pick up a smaller chisel, and you try to remove that material, you don't want to shove it in and then turn it, because look, you're going to bust out the piece. And another thing you don't want to do is ram it through with all your might like this. Because look what happened. I tore out that whole piece. And look, if you do that, just stop and put a little glue in there. So you want to really take your time and just gingerly take this material out, nice and easy. That's all you got to do, all right? So let me make quick work of these other ones. Then I'll flip it over and repeat the process on the outside. Looks pretty good on the outside, so I just need to remove the rest of this material right over here. There are a lot of ways that you could remove this material. You could do it with a chisel, you could do it with a coping saw. I'm doing it right here with the bandsaw because it's like wicked easy and fast. The one thing you need to keep in mind is that you want to make sure that the thin side of the pins is down. That's like the only thing you need to remember. Thin side of the pins are down and don't go past your line. That's looking pretty good. I didn't make any major mistakes yet. So now what I need to do is put this back in its place, grab the chisels, and pair right to that marking gauge line. And then flip it around to the other side and repeat the process and clean up the rest of that shoulder. Same setup as before, a couple of smacks. So now I'm gonna pick up my 3/4 inch chisel and I'm gonna stay in that line, making sure that I pull the chisel away. And ooh, boy, that's loud. Need these things so I don't go deaf. I'm just gonna tap down a little bit. Now it's helpful, instead of trying to go straight down, I'm gonna go down on an angle this way and then go down on an angle that way. I'm just gonna make quick work of it. So that's really it. I'm gonna just go right to my line, not past it, take my time and get that stuff out of there. That's looking good. This part is really cool. We need to clean up this whole ugly bottom surface and we need to clean up the shoulders or the cheeks of our pins. I still have the outside facing me. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just kind of clean out all the stuff that I didn't get on the bottom from before. And it's okay to back cut this a little bit. So you want to go in this motion just a little bit. Come over here, clean up this stuff. I'm just using a slicing motion and I'm going down and up. Look at this. You can see where I mangled it with the chisel. What happens? All right, you see that? That's why I did it on the inside face. Next, I'm going to pick up my square and I'm going to see how straight up and down these cuts are from my saw. Oh, the gaps there, you see it? That's telling me that I need to pair all of these anyway. The first time I did this, I struggled. So let me show you what not to do. So I'm trying to pair this with my chisel and make it nice and straight. Now you have to remember, like, this face right here is the inside of the dovetail. So you really see these 2 points right here and you don't want them to get mangled. But what I did, and what happens a lot of times when you're pushing this along, see, I broke out that corner right there. You see that? And if you break that corner out, it makes it really difficult to get a nice, straight, clean dovetail. So you need to grab a backer block and get it right in line with your pins. Then you can grab a block and use that with your clamp, because you don't want to mangle the face of your work. That's kind of like the thing doing this. You need to be aware of your parts all the time and keep in mind that they're going to be finished, so the more you can take care of them through the process, the less cleanup that you're going to have to do. This backer block allows my chisel to dive into it so I don't break off that little corner. See, the chisel goes right into it like that, so I don't break off the corner. But it's still a pain in the neck because look, this is what essentially you would have to do. You would have to pair a little bit, grab your square, and continue to check. And this thing's only 3/4 of an inch tall, so it's difficult to see how far out of square you are. So I was taught to do something like this. Take the square apart, put the blade up against the pin, and then put the body of my square up against it. Now you can really see how much I need to pair. Oh, You can see that it's really open at the top. So after years of doing this and struggling, I finally came up with this little gizmo right here. It's just a pairing block for my chisel to ride against, and let me show you how it works. I'm just going to take that backup block again. I'm going to put this right across the top. I'm going to make sure it's in line with the top of my pins, put in the clamp, grab my pairing block, and now what I can do is, oops, that's better. Grab my pairing block, put it right on the outside edge of my pin. I don't need that anymore. Take my clamp, and listen, it's a little cumbersome, all right? So you just got to get used to doing the work. I spend half my time fumbling around with this stuff, honestly. So if you find you're doing the same thing, give yourself a break, don't sweat it, and just continue through the process. Okay, now you can see that I have my block is sitting on top of my pins, so I know that it's perfectly square. I just take my chisel, and you are just going to love this. Watch. I'm just going to start with a little piece of the corner of my chisel, and I'm just going to take this little bit off. And I'm not forcing it, straight down. And now you can see that it's smooth here, but it's really ragged at the top. That's telling me I need to take more material off. So I just need to back off my clamp a tiny bit, tap it over with my chisel, not too much. The trick is you want to hold the chisel up against the flat spot of the block, like that there, see? And I'm just going to take a little bit off, slow and steady, and work my way down. Loosen the clamp again, knock it back, and it's really tempting to take a ton of material off, but don't. Now I'm going to take it apart and show you what it looks like. How's that sound? Now you can see that this surface is really nice and smooth, and I know it's square. I have to tell you, I've made a zillion dovetails, and none of them are perfect because I use a bunch of little tricks. So let me show you one of my favorite tricks right now. What I want to do is just take a smaller chisel, and I'm going to, believe it or not, just hollow out this little section of this pin. I mean, just a tiny bit, all right? And what this does, it just allows this pin to be a little more spongy when I fit it into the tailboard. That's pretty much it. A nice little trick. So I just need to do the same thing to all these surfaces. Now let's take a look at my pin board. You can see that the gap on this one is a little big and this one's a little smaller, and it's only like a 1/16 of an inch. And for you guys who want to do real meticulous work, what you want to do is just measure your pins, okay? And just take off the appropriate amount off of whatever side is too long, just to make this stuff as perfect as you can. For the rest of us, this is what we're gonna do. We just wanna transfer these pins onto this step, which is the tailboard. And you can see that I have my X mark from the table saw when these parts were marked up. So I know that this piece right here, this edge is super, super crispy, just like the back end of my pins. So the trick is you want to take the pin board, hold it upside down, keep it flush to the front, get the back end of our pins on the marking gauge scribe line, then pick up an old clamp and just rest it on there. Now it's just a good habit to double check to make sure that this is square. And believe it or not, you can get this square by the pressure you put on the clamp, just like that. Now I'm going to grab my mallet and I'm going to knock this board over until the back of the pins are on that line. And look, it's a little fussy. Actually, it's a lot fussy. So take your time and make sure you do this right. This is really, really pretty important. Now check this out. What I did with my pencil is I basically just took half of it off because I want to keep this up against the cheeks of my pins. And I'm going to make just one mark just like that. Next, what we need to do is take our square. I'm going to hold my pencil on my mark, or as close as I can get to it, and make a line. Same to this one. You want ultra thin lines. Last one. It's not perfect, but these are guidelines for my saw. So as long as I'm aware of where these lines are in reference to each other, I can just kind of follow those lines. The trick is you want to stay on the inside of these lines. You're taking this material out here. It's really, really important. So I'm going to pick up my gent saw and eyeball this line. And I'm not worried about the underside of it because, let's be honest, nobody's going to see it. So I'm really going to concentrate on this line, just like before. Just watch this. I'm going to remove this material. And I'm going to start going down the line. You see what happened? I kind of made a mistake, so I'm taking the saw out. And there's nothing stopping you from taking the saw out and realigning the curve. Nice and easy. You hear that? Okay. Now, you see how my saw is right next to the line? Watch this. I can manipulate where this blade is going to end by just turning it. What I want is to have more material on the face than the back side, because I would much rather pare it than wish I had it. You see? It's really tight on this line. Then I just have a little bit of more, a little bit more material to pare right there. And that's what I'm going for. Nice and easy. Since this is the face, I don't want these teeth to go past my line. If you cut on the opposite side of the line, you ain't gonna know it until you go to fit this tailboard to the pins. And then, oops. All right, that's pretty good. So, this chisel edge is starting to get a little bit beat, and it should, because I was, putting it to the woodshed, as they say. So instead of sharpening it, I'm just going to tune it up with this piece of hard maple, and it has diamond paste on it. And look, see how it's a little ragged right there? See how the tip is just a little bit ragged? So what I want to do is hold it flat, go across, just a couple of times, then hold it on this micro bevel angle, and just lightly go across the diamond paste. You got to be careful not to roll it like that, all right? Nice and easy. Just stay on that angle. And if you're not comfortable doing it with your hands, get one of the gizmos. All righty. Oh, I got my first scratches in it. First scratches are bound to happen. So, since the top of the step is the important side, I'm going to start working on that first. Just like before. Flip it over, repeat the process. The last thing I need to do, and this is kind of important when you're doing these kind of dovetails, is the front face of your pin board. So I'm just going to push right down on that line with my 1-inch chisel. Get this thing started. Like that. Pick up my saw and cut that piece out. Staying away from my chisel line because I'm going to pare it. I'd rather leave material and take it out with a chisel than the other way around. You can see right here the shoulder line from the chisel and the amount that I left from the saw. So again, I'm going to pick up my chisel and I'm just going to take a tiny little piece out. And I'm going to continue to go down the width just a little at a time. And you can use a slicing motion. It's way easier than trying to ram it in, because look, if I'm trying to ram it, see what happens? So just nice and easy. I'll pick up my smaller chisel, make a relief cut to give it a little more room. That's cool, right? Get out of there. Now I'm going to cut these with the bandsaw. I think that it looks pretty good coming off the bandsaw, but before I can just jam these two boards together, I need to clean out a lot of crud. So again, it's just like the process before. take this material out nice and easy. I can put it in the vise if I want. Now this is the top of the step I'm looking at, all right? Because if I have any breakout, it's going to be on the underside of my project. Some of these things are ugly. But you know what? When I first learned how to do this, it was a process. And trust me when I tell you, I have made every mistake that you could possibly make in woodworking, except quitting. I just never quit on the process. So I got better over time. That looks pretty good. All right, moment of truth. I'm going to put the pin board in the vise with the outside facing out. I'm going to take my tailboard and with bated breath, I'm going to hold it up to this pin board and just tap it into place. You can hear it. That is not going in. Now you just don't want to smash this thing down in there because obviously it's not fitting. And if you look closely right here, you can see this corner on this tail and the corner on this tail are starting to break. And if you bust that stuff out, it's going to show up right here in the corners. So take the board out and check it out. You can see all this bruising right here. That's where this thing is rubbing. So I want to keep the top up, take a chisel again, and when I see that bruising, lightly take out that material. Just like that. You don't want to take off too much. And now it's just a matter of trial and error. Gonna hold it up. Tappity tap tap. And that's basically it. Tap it in, try it. Tap it in and try it. Now I don't want to continue on because I really want to show you what would happen if you don't do that. If you make it too tight and you just mash through it like McGilla Gorilla, watch what's going to happen. I get a big space here from when I didn't cut it right, and these right here are super tight. And if I had to guess, I was going to say it's going to crack right here. But we'll see. Just like I was saying, that corner broke off. Look, you see it? I mean, you can definitely see that I took too much material off of this pin. There's a huge gap right there, right? But overall, it's not that bad. So that's basically it. Now you just need to do this 3 more times and glue the pieces together. So just to recap, on the table saw, you want to make sure that the inside of these boards is up so you get a really, really nice crisp line. You want to make sure that your marking gauge is exactly to the thickness of your boards. You want to scribe those lines as perfect as you can. And you really want to take your time and understand the layout of each one of these pins and then cut them appropriately. Use the little block, the cheetah, you know, make them perfect. And then just do what I showed you. Just relieve a little bit of these cheeks and a little bit inside here. And just continue to work this thing with a wicked sharp chisel, and trust me, you are going to get there. Now we have all of our pins and tails cut. It's time to glue the 2 side pieces together so it looks like this. And don't try to adjust your set. This is a different color wood. This is steamed tiger maple. It's just a different wood that I have because I got pots all over this place making this thing, all right? So it's essentially really, really simple stuff. You can see that I have 3 clamps on my bench. I have a little bit of glue, and I have my cutoff piece on the back because I want to have nice straight clamping pressure across this joint. So I'm just going to put a light bead of glue across this piece. A little dab will do you. Going to stay away from the end right there, you see that? The trick is don't use too much glue. Just a little bit of glue. That looks pretty good. Set into place. The only thing you really have to worry about is making sure that the bottom of this doesn't walk on you. And right here at the top is nice and tight. You see what's going on? It's starting to walk a little bit. So that means I just need to center the clamp a little bit better. A little light pressure, front and back. You can start to see the squeeze out there. Make sure it's nice and flush. Nice. That looks pretty good. I'm going to set it off to the side for a few hours, and then we can cut the curve on the bottom. Check it out. Here are my side pieces. After I did all the pins and tails, I just basically glued the small piece to the big piece twice and cut the curve on the bottom at the bandsaw. Now I can test how precise my work is. And you know, overall, it ain't that bad. I mean, the top looks pretty good here. But the bottom ones, they're really not that perfect. And that's okay with me. That's not gonna bother me, especially when they're, basically 2 feet apart, right? So don't sweat it, man. If you're doing this and you got this far and it's not perfect, just let it not be perfect. That's the whole point of doing this stuff, is to do it and enjoy doing it and learn and progress over time. One of the things that I've learned is that it's really important to get the mill marks off of this stuff before you assemble it, because it's no fun to clean up all this stuff after it's put together. I'm just gonna clean up the inside of this because I do the outside afterwards. All this scalloping is from the helical head on my planer and my joiner. I don't know if you can see it, but here, I got a piece of chalk. Check this out. That's crazy, right? I mean, look at that. That's not a good surface. And it's not easy or fun to take off. So, I pick up my orbital sander. It's got 120 grit paper on it, because why not? What you really need to be aware of is that you don't want to sand the inside of your pins. Stay way outside that realm. This isn't going to be a perfect finish either. Watch. You see all these swirl marks right here? This, here. It's just fuzzy looking, right? That is what you don't want. It'll show up with the finish. And this is the drawback of an orbital sander. So how do you deal with that, right? Well, I pick up a card scraper. It's great because it's just taking these little tiny shavings, and I can go across the grain. I can make sure that this glue joint looks really great. I can go all over the place. Nice and easy. Now watch. I'm going to grab the chalk, and it barely even grabs onto it because it's such a nice smooth finish. The last thing I'm going to do is just take some 150 grit sandpaper, and I just sand the whole surface, making sure, like I said, I stay away from my pins. All right, that's close enough. Let's finally glue some pieces together. The trick to any project is just don't freak out. And
set. Pick it back up. And action.
when it comes to gluing this project or any other project, the trick is don't freak out, all right? Just take your time and be well prepared. I've built enough of these to where I made this gizmo here, so I was able to clamp my 2 side pieces and keep them upright. I got my glue, and I have these little clamping cauls, and basically they sit right atop of the pins, and they have these little notches in them, so they're just gonna press down on the tailboard. Now, I'm not gonna glue up all these at the same time. First, I'm just gonna glue the bottom step. The trick when gluing something is that you don't wanna put too much glue on any surface, all right? Now look, I just have this little spatula right here, a little dab, and I'm just gonna put it on my pins. You don't need to slaughter it. Just a little bit of glue goes a long way. And I'm just taking my time. I know it says this stuff's gonna set up in 10 minutes, but I'm not gonna stress out. Easy does it. Since we're gonna be seeing the inside of these tailboards, I just like to put a little double do-ya right here. Do the same to this side. Perfect. All right. Grab my hearing protection. I have my pieces appropriately marked. See, bottom step, front, top. You notice I'm not putting any glue on the tailboard because I don't have to. Just gonna start it on both sides, nice and easy. It's the name of the game, nice and easy. Pick up one of my cauls, lay it flat, and tap this thing into place evenly. When it's close, I'm going to hold it across the top of my entire pin board and just knock it into place. That's not bad. Same to the other side. Perfect. Now I'm going to take my block, you see, it's going to sit on my tailboards, and what I'm looking at is this gap right here. I want to try to close up these 2 gaps. I'm just gonna look right here the entire time. You can even hear it, right? It's starting to crunch down. You see a little bit of glue? It's starting to squeeze out right here. So it's telling me this thing is sitting nicely. That looks fantastic, right? Come around to the other side and repeat the process. Okay, you know what, that's pretty good, but I have a mistake going on. I have a little bit of a gap on both sides of this front pin, probably because this thing was not flat. So you can see how I can move it. So I'm gonna take my clamp, put in the front. I don't need a lot of pressure, just a little bit. And then I'm gonna jam these little wedges right in that slot. I'm gonna grab my wedge like I was saying. I'm gonna hold it in the back and put a clamp across the front, and you'll see this gap close right up. All right. Nice. Now you can see that it's nice and tight. It's nice. Now you know dovetails don't need a ton of clamping pressure because basically once they get married together, they're going to stay that way. So that's why this is nice and tight. I'm not even going to put a clamp on it. So I just need to repeat the process for the top step. Perfect. I'm just going to leave it alone and let it dry. Once you get to this stage, it's all downhill from here. The last thing I really need to do is make the stretcher. So I need to put a tail on the end of the stretchers, and I do it right here at the bench with this little gizmo here. This is just a ramp block with a notch cut out of it so I can put the clamp on it. So I'm going to take my stretcher, butt it up to it, clamp her down. Make sure it's up tight against the front. That looks good. This is all just repetitive work. And it's a great exercise in precision work and slowing down. So again, I need to take my chisel, use my body weight, and push down. Take that little bit out, and now I can use my mallet and more aggressively take this stuff out of there. All right, let me flip it over and repeat the process. I think this is a great detail on the back stretcher. The reason why they're tails is because it keeps the back from splitting out. The way it goes on is just like everything else we've done up to this point. I came 6 inches up and then I put my stretcher against there and I traced my tail marks. Then I just squared down with my square, then I took my marking gauge and I made my marking gauge line for the thickness. It's just like before. Cut it, leave the line, then pare it and fit this piece into that spot and glue it on. And once it's glued on, you just need to do the same thing to the front and check them out. These things look great, right? It's the same process, all right? That's what I love about this project. It's the same process. I just made another tail right here, a half a tail. It looks awesome. And I just cleaned it and glued it to the top of my step. And I made sure that it was nice and tight and nice and flush. I also added this cool little detail right here, the curve that I cut on the bandsaw. The last thing I need to do to this piece before I put oil on it is just to clean up all these surfaces and make sure that it's perfect. The first thing I need to do is make sure that these pins are flush with the tailboard. I have my chisel here. Just like before, I'm going to hold it flat against the tailboard and I'm just going to nick this corner off, like that. I need to take it easy. The closer you get to finishing, you start to rush. And that is where mistakes are made, boy. So go easy. Nice and flush. Same over here. Man, I gotta say, I really didn't believe those guys at Blue Spruce when they said this was going to be sharp right out of the box. But honestly, they proved me wrong. That's all I need to do with this chisel. Now that all the pins are nice and flat, the last thing I need to do is clean this with sandpaper, break all the edges, hit it with a card scraper, and we'll be ready for some ready for a nice coat of oil. This is going to be so dramatic, and I cannot wait to show you. This is boiled linseed oil, and it's all I'm going to apply. Watch this. This is tiger maple. It's what they call steamed tiger maple, so it has a really rich color to it, and it already looks 100 years old, even though it's brand spanking new. That's why I put this oil on, because it's going to bring all this crazy grain out to life. They call it like popping the grain or whatever. You know, I never really call it that. This is boiled linseed oil, so you really can't screw it up. So you can go in a circular pattern. You can just do whatever you want. Just put it on deeply into the grain. Let's check out these steps. Another thing to keep in mind when you're putting oil on is that you gotta evaluate your work, and if you see any glue anywhere or anything that needs to be fixed, now's the time to fix it. And oh boy, look at that. I left the pencil line right there. So the beauty of having this oil is I can just scrape it off and reapply a little more oil, and nobody's gonna be the wiser. This is the last time I'm ever gonna touch this piece in this fashion. Because once I get the oil on it and let it dry, and I wipe it down, I'm going to send it out to my buddy who's going to put a clear coat of catalyzed varnish on it. It looks nice. I like it. And this is like really the reason I do it. This is the natural color of that steamed tiger maple. And there's no stain on this at all. Because I'm pretty much a purist. I take pride in how I cut apart that board at the very beginning and interpret all that material and think about it and consistently mark all these pieces and put it all together in a way that is harmonious in this form. And this thing ain't perfect, and that's okay with me. You know, I did the best that I could, and I'm just gonna let it be what it is, and I'm just not gonna beat myself up over the parts where I wasn't so perfect. Because trust me, the person that I give it to, it's going to be really perfect for them. And I believe if you build this stool, it's going to be perfect for you or whoever you decide to give it to. I had a great time building this today. I hope you did too. I'm Tommy Mack, and we'll see you next time.
Plans and patterns for this project and more are available at wickedsmartwoodworking.com.